people forgot the art of small talks, breaking the ice, making human connections.
Yeah. Yeah. And if any expats are interested in coming to Singapore for work or life, what kind of advice will you give to them?
You make sure you earn a lot of money because it's not cheap.
Hi, this is Shimeng, a Chinese Irish who's currently based in Singapore. Today I'm going to meet with this very interesting French guy who's been staying in Singapore for the past 15 years. And for him, Singapore is a forever home now. And from what he told me, food could be a very good icebreaker to blend into the society. To initiate small chats with Singaporeans about food in places like hawker center could be really helpful. If you still have trouble blending into the society as an expat, maybe you should hear his story. Hi, Joelle. Thank you so much for being willing to share your thoughts and ideas with us today. Can you please tell us about what have brought you to Singapore in the first place and how long you've been here?
Thank you for inviting me. So I've been in Singapore for quite a long time, I must say, easily close to 15 years.
Oh, that's a long time.
I came in the 90s, I'll share a little bit more in a moment, and then I had the second coming to Singapore in 2009.
Right, so there was a break in the middle.
Yeah, a big break basically. When I returned to Europe, I spent mostly my time in London, in the UK.
Right. Yeah. So why you came to Singapore again?
When I came to, so the first time was I was kind of graduating. I was doing an internship in Paris in a video games company, and I was really interested to work in Asia. I kind of like I didn't have a chance to travel much. And I thought that would be, I needed a bit of adventure and discover another side of the world outside France. So I contacted quite a lot of companies in the region, anywhere from Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, so on and so forth. And I had a good connection with a local company here, which was a publishing house doing branding and design as well for clients. And they were publishing books about design. And brand strategy, design, so on and so forth. And it just happened that at the time, it doesn't make me look younger, but at the time, emails were actually quite new.
Okay.
So when you were sending emails to people, they were likely to respond personally. It didn't end up in a junk mail. So, because it was still new, not so many people had emails. So I managed to make contacts with a few CEOs and directors of agencies or of companies because I was interested to work in digital, in interactive, in marketing, that type of stuff. So it happened that the CEO and founder of one agency in Singapore was going to Europe to attend a big design fair in Germany. And he said, "Oh my God, this is really cool. You're writing to me from France. How is it?" So we start chatting, and he said, "I'm going to that big design fair. You're in Paris. I can swing by over the weekend and come and see you and meet you personally."
Oh, that's so interesting. I say,
"That's really cool. Yes, let's do so." So he did, and I showed him a little bit about what I was doing, and we had a nice chat. I took him around Paris, and he really enjoyed himself, and we enjoy each other's company. And then when he returned to Singapore, he emailed me and said, "If you want, I can offer you a 1-year trial as a consultant to my company to help us digitize." Because they were doing a lot at the time of graphic design, print work, and they wanted to do websites and at the time more interactive stuff. And I accepted, and I went around. So it was a big change for me, obviously.
Oh wow! So it all came from the email contact in the first place.
It all came from prospecting and going out and talking to people and say, "Hey, I'm in France. That's what I do. I love to come and work for you." And so he offered me a job, and I went around and see my family with a begging bowl to buy myself a 1-way ticket to Singapore. And that's how I landed with a suitcase.
You all seem to be like a very explorative person, huh? Because I invited you out of a coffee time as well, and then you said yes straight away. You've always seemed to be explorative in trying new ideas and new thoughts and new things, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's a kind of a mindset. I mean, obviously within reason.
Yeah.
So you take calculated risks as much as you can. But then at the time, I was in my early 20s, and that is the time where you want to explore and do things and try stuff, etc. Because if you don't do it when you are 20s, when are you going to do it?
Yeah, that's so interesting.
So it was absolutely cool.
What was Singapore like back in the?
Well, it was in 1997. It was kind of different and same at the same time. Different in the sense of it was a lot less vibrant. So it's always been a bit more international than the surrounding, capitals in the region in Southeast Asia. But it was indeed very, very different. So, I mean, I'm really going to sound like an old man, but there were a lot of, Singapore used to have a World Trade Center, for example, which was where Vivo City sits now. There were fewer MRT lines, fewer stations, so we used to take buses a lot. You could take buses which were either air-conned or non-air-conned, which was cheaper, obviously. But then you have to, make do with the journey for like 45 minutes, an hour with no aircon, opening the window, etc. There were fewer expats. And the expats in Singapore were really expats, so they didn't really mix so much with the locals. So they were literally living in a little expat bubble. So they were like more of a divide between, here are the locals, here are the expats. And it was much harder to find good French food than it is now. Yes. Because it was expensive, and it was in a few restaurants or hotels. It's nothing compared to what it is today.
Were you trying to keep a French lifestyle, or you were trying to explore like Singapore when you came here, like Singaporean food?
I purposely tried very hard not to spend too much time with the French in Singapore. Because otherwise, what's the point to come here? If I wanted to meet a lot of French people, I would have stayed in France.
Yes.
There are a lot there, by the way. So it kind of didn't make sense. No, the whole point of coming here was precisely to immerse myself a little bit more into a different culture and understand, the values, how people live, what's happening, what makes them tick, and so on and so forth. So it was actually, I did that on purpose. So I from day one, I really spent a lot more time making, local friends or friends with people from all over the world, because there were, quite a lot there, Australians and Malaysian, Indonesian, etc. So.
Which is also a big advantage of living in Singapore, isn't it? You get to meet people from all walks of life so easily in such a tiny city.
Yes.
But what struck you the most about the Singaporean culture? Like, did you have any culture shock when you first arrived here?
Yes, I did. Obviously, because as I mentioned, I didn't had a lot of travel experience before coming to Singapore. So the cultural shock. So first, it was, I don't think really is culture. I think it's more geographical shock. It's the weather. Because I come from the northeast of France, close to Germany, and I arrived in Singapore in January with all my winter clothes, because it was cold and rainy in Paris when I left, and when I arrived here it was like 30 degrees and the humidity. I never experienced anything like that before.
Yes.
So when I walked out of the airport for the first time, I had trouble catching my breath.
Yes. Oh.
Because the air was so thick.
Yes.
And it's something you don't really notice, because what do you mean the air is so thick? No, the air is the air. It's the same everywhere. No, it's not. Because, it sounds like a funny details, but no, the air is much, it feels lighter when you do not have much humidity. And obviously, after that was the food.
Yes.
And obviously, the food was quite hard, just foreign, obviously.
Yes.
I was used to Chinese, Vietnamese food, etc., because we have plenty of that in France as well. So it's not like I've never seen that before.
Right.
But it's not so spicy.
No.
The food we have, the Vietnamese, Chinese food we have in France is quite bland, because that's how people like it.
Yeah.
So the spices, the chili, etc., the heat, and just being able to identify and recognize the food and say, geez. So I learned very quickly that if it's red, it's spicy. Avoid any food that's a bit red, just don't touch. Okay, so actually my food choices were very limited,
right,
until I developed a palate and a tolerance for it. Now it's okay, I can eat whatever, you know, curry or spicy food and etc. I have no problem at all. But it took me a long time to be able to adapt to it.
Yes.
Before that,
I can imagine.
it's very straightforward. So I was eating spicy food, the next day I was sick. Simple as that. And it took me like a year to get used to it.
Okay.
A very sensitive stomach as well, which doesn't
Right.
help. So yeah, it was a really, really long process.
Okay. So does it change you a lot in terms of the diet after staying here for so many years? That,
Yes, yes. What changes is actually the reverse cultural shock. So when I go back to France, Europe, for example, for work or for holidays, after a few days, like, geez, I want noodles for breakfast, or when I have fancy, so I usually end up eating, Chinese food or etc. after a while, because you kind of like miss it. And I'm very happy to go back and say, oh my God, great croissant and a nice breakfast, fantastic. We have fantastic food in France, and still by far my favorite cuisine. But then you start missing small things. Oh, I miss my coffee, and I miss my kaya toast, or I miss that, etc. Because you can't. It's not that available.
Yeah. And in your opinion, what do you think that makes Singapore such a dreamland for people coming from everywhere?
What makes it a magnet? I mean, there's such a host of reasons. So if you look at Southeast Asia, there aren't that many alternatives. So if you're a business and you want to expand in Asia, where would you go? Or if you want an outpost in Southeast Asia, where would you go? When you look at, first there is language. You have to speak English. And there are not many countries in the region. I mean, there is Malaysia, but there is something else. But Philippines, who have different types of regulatory environments. So by default, especially if you have family, you will want to go to a place where people speak English, because you want the kids to be able, to continue education, or they speak good English, etc. It makes your job easier as an expat as well.
Yes.
So okay, Singapore tick that box. Then second is very westernized. So I'm only speaking from a Western expat's point of view here. But when you arrive in Singapore, it's just the right level of difference. With a lot of familiarity. You can find the food you like, it costs a fortune, but you can find it. The ways of doing business, everything, the culture is different, but still similar enough for you to be able to function.
Yes.
You're not going to a completely remote and so exotic place, You're not going to Japan, for example, which is fantastic, but walking there, doing business there, it's a totally different ballgame. So Singapore, it's westernized enough to make it easy for people to come here and be able to hit the ground running fast enough and bring their family, and their family doesn't feel like it's a hardship trip.
And you've been here like for 15 years, and you must seeing like this Singapore grew into a society where it is a lot more inclusive in taking expats from everywhere to come and work here, and in the meantime it became more and more expensive. So how did you find about the changes, or what was the changes? Was it much cheaper living here? What was it like living as an expat?
It's always been expensive.
Okay.
Singapore has never been a cheap city, never.
Right.
So it's always been, from my time and my recollection, Singapore has been expensive because it's always been doing well financially and attracting people to come here, work, set up business. So the flip side of that, because it's a small island and space is constrained, then obviously you have no choice, price go up. It's kind of, it goes with the package to a certain extent.
You've established your family here with a Singaporean lady. So do you think there's a deliberate boundary between a foreigner or a Singaporean, or from your personal example that you successfully blended into the mainstream Singaporean culture very, very well? How do you define that? Or do you think there's a division?
I think it's kind of like, the saying, it takes two hands to clap. So on one hand, I believe strongly the onus is on the visitors, the foreigners, to make an effort to integrate. So if you have to tilt the balance, it's not your country.
No.
So when you come in, you are the ones who have to make the most efforts to integrate. It's kind of like common sense, obviously. Yeah, yes, of course. So the way to do that, to me, what I found is, again, try to. It's sometimes very hard because if you work, say, for big companies, etc., and at a certain age as well, you know, it's harder to make friends. But that's in general, because people have their life, they already have their family, they already have their friends, they already have their social life.
Yes.
They are not free.
Yes.
They are not so free to entertain you.
Yeah.
Just as simple as that. But that is the case in every city in the world. Just simple as that. But going the extra mile, you know, and I find food is probably one of the best icebreaker in the world. Wherever you go, which country, whatever cities, food is the icebreaker. So bringing food from your country to your office, getting people to try it, or going with your friend and say, I really want to try that, you know, that dish, you know, which one is the best? Can you, how do I eat it, you know, etc. So that actually works a treat. And then bonding over sharing food is like super important. And that's a nice icebreaker. And even making small talks, you know, talk to taxi drivers, talk to the
I love
hawkers.
the taxi drivers. Yeah.
You know, I still do that now, which sometimes earn me some, you know, some strange looks. But most of the time, so when I go to a hawker center, when I go to a coffee shop, and the guy is doing a dish I like and he's doing it very well, I go and see him and I say, mate, this is great because, you know, your dumpling noodles were so good because they are not so, you know, mushy, etc. They're still a bit springy, like very nice, etc. I can see you really, oh wow, you notice, wow, thank you. And the guy, they are grateful, naturally grateful. And people usually forget, especially nowadays where we spend so much time on our phones and on our screens, and we become a lot more selfish and self-centered. People forgot the art of small talks, breaking the ice, making human connections. That seems completely, you know, lost. Unless you're old. But which is really sad. But that's, again, there's no, people want that. People want human connections, no matter where you are in the world. So just be nice, genuinely nice, obviously. When you like something, say it, make small talks, engage, take part in social activities. So, and that's how you will integrate, and people will say, oh wow, this guy is genuine, he's a nice guy, he's making efforts. Now suddenly I don't see him as part of a uniform group of expats with this kind of profile. I see the individual. And that individual, I'm an individual, he's an individual, there are things we can connect. Okay, you don't even think of seeing you as an expat or as a foreigner, whatever your race is, etc. They start to connect on shared interest and passion. That's how you break the ice and make friends.
Yeah. And if any expats are interested in coming to Singapore for work or life, what kind of advice will you give to them?
You make sure you earn a lot of money because it's not cheap. So make sure you talk to your HR manager. Because, you know, it's so I think it's I definitely encourage people to come in, especially those who haven't been to Asia so much. Just again because of the personal growth benefits. Even if you stay here for 1 year and it's an experience, and if you don't earn so much, and if you can afford not to earn much, just come, just do it.
I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you also are interested in telling me about your version of your stories and experiences in Singapore, please do contact me on YouTube. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas.